What is up, guys? In today's video, we're going to be talking about the lock-on pistol in Fortnite Chapter 6 because it was added in this week's update, and this was a pretty sought-after or good weapon last time it was in the game. As always, if you guys do enjoy this video, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you like some more, and comment down below what you think of the lock-on pistol in Chapter 6. So I've seen a lot of people, hyping this gun and talking about how they're excited for it to be back because of how good it was in Chapter 5. Last time the lock-on pistol was in the game, it was pretty decent and it was getting a lot of attention, and pro players were even using it in FNCS finals to get Storm Surge. This is mainly because at the time in Chapter 5, every other weapon in the loot pool was projectile, meaning they had bullet drop and bullet travel time, while the lock-on pistol was still hit scan, meaning you didn't need to worry about bullet drop, you didn't need to worry about bullet travel time, and the fact that the pistol was still hit scan made it much easier to use at longer ranges than a lot of the Chapter 5 weapons, and that made kind of what is a mid weapon somewhat decent in specific situations, or somewhat decent because it was hit scan. In Chapter 6, every weapon in the loot pool right now, aside from the hunting rifle, is hit scan, meaning that quirk or advantage it had in Chapter 5 is gone because it's just normal now. It doesn't have an advantage in that aspect anymore because every other weapon is also hit scan. And overall, as a weapon, I don't really care for the lock-on pistol. The damage is 25 per shot, so it's okay. And you can shoot it somewhat fast if you have a decent trigger finger. But I don't think it's really anything special on its own. And when we have a, AR in the game like the Hollow Twister AR, that is going to be most people's main kind of spray weapon. And as you've seen as this season has gone on, most people prefer to carry two guns, or even less in some cases when people just use the katana as a shotgun. So if I'm only going to carry two weapons, I 100% want that to be the Sentinel Pump Shotgun and the Hollow Twister AR. No questions asked. I did use it a decent amount today and tried it out and used three guns. I was using the pump, the lock-on pistol, and the Hollow Twister AR. Thought about just doing pump and lock-on pistol, but the Twister AR is just so much better at longer ranges that if you're trying to replace it with the lock-on pistol, I think you're really going to struggle. Also, the pull-out time on the lock-on pistol is horrible, which makes it not a great weapon to use in between pump shots. Typically, with a pump shotgun, you want to shoot your pump, swap to some sort of, other weapon to do damage in between pump shots. But I feel like with the lock-on pistol, by the time I pull it out and shoot one shot, my pump is ready to shoot again, and then I want to go back to it. So most of my time, I'm just spending pulling out the gun anyways. So I really don't like it as a pump follow-up. And then I also don't really like it as a mid to long range weapon. I feel like it's just kind of mid, and the lock-on feature is the main selling point of this weapon. But I did want to start to cover it, just as a gun on its own, because I feel like that really matters. If it's a terrible gun, the lock-on feature can help, but it's not going to save it. If it was a good gun just in its own right, like how it was in Chapter 5, then the lock-on feature is just going to be bonus and be good, But compared to every other weapon in the loot pool, or every other spray weapon in the loot pool right now, I think the lock-on pistol is just probably the worst. The lock-on effect is definitely the weapon saving grace, and it can be helpful in some situations, but just because it's helpful doesn't mean that it's worth using all the time. Every time you pick an item in Fortnite, you only have 5 inventory slots, right? So you're choosing to use that weapon over something else. And so if you choose to use something over something else, the value it provides needs to be, better or as good as that other thing. And to me, I just don't think the lock-on pistol is it. And for most people, I don't think it is going to be it. But getting into why some people think it might be, or the situations where the lock-on effect is really helpful. The first is going to be whenever you're playing around any sort of bushes. When enemy players are in bushes, you can easily find them and lock onto them. As long as they're in range of the lock effect, which is 50 meters, you can just aim at the bush, and then when you drag your crosshair over them, you'll start locking on like normal. Whenever somebody is using mobility items, it may be easier to hit them with the pistol if you have it locked. But like I said, the lock-on effect is only 50 meters, which is quite limited if you consider someone's using the kinetic blade or shockwaves. You probably only have a little bit of time before they're, more than 50 meters away from you, right? And the way the lock-on effect works is you have to not be shooting for the lock to be locking. You have to aim at them without shooting, and then the weapon starts to lock on. if you're actively shooting, you don't get the locks. So to me, like if someone's shockwaving away from me, I want to shoot at them as fast as I can before they get far away. But like by doing that with the lock-on pistol, you're kind of missing out on the lock-on effect. So it's kind of weird. But a lot of people are gonna say its best case is when the enemy is using mobility. If they're shockwaving away, if they're using the kinetic blade, if they're using the typhoon blade, you can lock onto them. And even if your aim isn't the greatest, you can get some damage in that time. It is true, but they need to be within 50 meters. Me personally, I would rather just use the hollow twister AR in those situations because I don't have the hardest time shooting somebody that's using shockwaves, the kinetic blade, or the typhoon blade. And I have a better, just much better weapon for when they're past 50 meters. When it's closer than 50 meters, you can maybe argue the lock-on is good, but like even within 50 meters, I feel fine with the hollow twister AR. And greater than 50 meters, I feel like the hollow twister AR is like head and shoulders like significantly better than the lock-on pistol. Another time that a lot of people have said the lock-on pistol is going to be amazing is going to be on island, because there's a lot of people flying around, to get up the island. And that could be a situation where the lock-on aspect is good because you can lock onto the people flying, and that should be easier than just shooting them normally, right? Again, with the lock-on pistol only having 50-meter lock-on range, I think it's really unlikely that you're going to be able to like 250 to 0 somebody out of the sky with the lock-on aspect of the lock-on pistol. I typically needed to swap to my hollow twister AR to finish them, like after they got out of lock-on range. And to me personally, if I'm going to have to do that, I would rather just be on the hollow twister AR the whole time than have to like swap weapons, get back on target, and then start shooting the enemy again. Like a lot of times when people are flying around, you don't have that much time to shoot at them. So that little bit of time where you're swapping weapons and then getting back on target, I feel like is pretty meaningful. And I would rather just be on the hollow twister AR the whole time spraying them rather than getting some damage on the lock-on, swapping to the twister for the finish. Really comes down to how good your aim is, but I think that if your aim is decent, the hollow twister AR is going to be better. Like the lock-on pistol can be good in those situations, and it can work, and a lot of times, and it'll probably feel good when it works. But like I said, if your aim is good or decent, you're probably just going to be better off with the hollow twister AR because it's a ridiculous weapon, and you're not going to have to worry about swapping weapons or using the lock-on pistol at greater than 50 meters with like the regular aiming. I do think there's people out there who will probably benefit from using the lock-on pistol in the short term. Like let's say you really struggle to hit people gliding, you really struggle to hit people using mobility. The lock-on pistol can be like a simple, plug-in solution where like as long as you have that in your inventory and the enemy is within 50 meters, you're going to be able to lock on and hit them. But I think it's more of like a short-term solution than anything, because once the enemy gets past 50 meters, the weapon isn't that great because you lose that lock on. And then also when the lock on pistol inevitably gets vaulted, you're going to struggle because you're going to have to use a regular weapon. Like if you just decide I'm using the lock on pistol on anybody using mobility, it can work for now, but when it's gone, you're going to have to go back to a regular weapon, and you haven't gained experience aiming with a regular weapon in that time. Whereas if you use the regular weapon and you get used to aiming with the regular weapon, and you get used to, shooting people using mobility items, you get used to shooting people gliding and stuff, even if the hollow twister AR does get vaulted, there's going to be another AR that takes its place. So that's another reason why I'm not the biggest fan of this. Like it can work, but it's more of like a band-aid solution than anything else. Whereas like if you learn to aim and get better at aiming, that's a long-term solution. It's like if you give somebody a fish, they'll eat once, or if you teach them how to fish, they'll eat forever, or whatever that expression is. If you learn to aim, you'll beam people with any weapon. If you rely on this, it can work for now, but when it's gone, it's gone. One thing I did want to talk about though, so my personal opinion is no, the lock-on pistol isn't worth using, and you're better off using something else in that inventory slot and then learning how to aim with the hollow twister AR if you do struggle. One thing I did want to talk about though, that is nice if you're going to use the lock-on pistol anyways, is that you can actually lock on with this weapon while you're personally in the sky. So other weapons you can't aim in when you're, in the sky. So like if you shockwave onto somebody, you can't aim while you're shockwaving. With the lock-on pistol, you can. And the reason why this really matters is because you can start that lock-on effect early. If you're shockwaving onto somebody, you can pull out the lock-on pistol, aim in as you're, approaching them, and then land on them with already, 2 or 3 shots locked, shoot them, or wait for the final shot to be locked, shoot that, and then swap to your pistol. So if you are going to be using the lock-on pistol, I would highly recommend taking advantage of this whenever you can, because it's pretty insane that that's a thing. But yeah, if you're shockwaving onto somebody, if you're using the void mask, anytime you're in the sky, you can actually aim in with the lock-on pistol, get shots locked early, and then just land on somebody with like a bunch of damage, which is kind of crazy. But that is going to be it for this video. As always, if you guys did find this to be helpful, informative, interesting, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you like some more, comment down below what you think of the lock-on pistol and if you're going to use it. Me personally, still using the Sentinel Pump. Hollow Twister are double mobility and heals. I feel like that's just, both those weapons are good and versatile, and then, double heals gives you so much freedom for how you can play and how you can approach situations. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. If you enjoyed this, give it a like, subscribe if you like some more, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.